My lawyer told me to call my parents and say I lost $35 million. What he knew changed everything. The call lasted 6 minutes. My lawyer's voice was flat, almost bored, like he was reading me the weather. Say you lost it, all of it. Say the deal collapsed and you're broke. Then hang up and don't explain anything else. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it sounded insane. Elias Kwan had never once been wrong about anything in the 11 years he'd worked for me. So I stopped laughing. Why? I asked. Because I need to know something about your family, he said. And there's only one way to find out fast. Rewind. 6 weeks. My name is Mara Whitfield. I'm 34. 3 months earlier, I'd sold the analytics company I built out of a spare bedroom for $35 million, and for about 2 weeks, I felt like the luckiest person alive. I grew up the quiet daughter in a loud house. My brother Colin was the one who got toasted at Thanksgiving. Quarterback shoulders, easy laugh, always somehow the reason the family photo looked good. I was the one who got asked gently if I'd figured out what I wanted to do yet, well into my late 20s. My father, Robert, ran a mid-sized real estate firm founded by his own father, Arthur Whitfield, a man everyone in 3 counties still called Mr. Whitfield with real respect. My mother, Diane, ran the house, and more quietly, ran my father. I didn't need their money. I never had. What I wanted, the thing I'd have traded most of that $35 million for, if you'd asked me honestly, was for my father to look at me the way he looked at Colin. Just once. Without the polite surprise in his voice. That's the wound Elias was about to press on. And he knew it, because I'd told him, late one night after too much wine at a client dinner, exactly how much it still stung. Elias wasn't just my lawyer. He'd handled the sale of my company, and in doing so, he'd started quietly cross-referencing some paperwork my father had asked me to sign months earlier. Just a formality, Dad had said. Your grandfather's old trust needs updating now that you've had this windfall. Elias called it a formality, too. Right up until he found the inconsistency. There's a distribution schedule attached to your grandfather's trust, he told me, sliding a folder across his desk like it was made of glass. It doesn't match the one filed with the county 11 years ago. Someone amended it, and the amendment routes almost everything toward your father's business account instead of into the trust's original beneficiaries. I stared at the paper. Which beneficiaries? You, Colin, and a foundation your grandfather set up before he died, that nobody's touched in over a decade. I felt cold in a room that wasn't cold at all. I could be wrong, Elias said, which is the thing lawyers say right before they turn out to be exactly right. But if your family thinks you're flush with cash right now, and they've been quietly bleeding a trust for over a decade, I want to see what they do the moment they think that cash disappears. That was the test. Fake the loss. Watch what happens next. I sat with it for 3 days. I didn't want to know. That's the truth. People don't say enough in these stories. Sometimes you delay finding out your family doesn't love you the way you hoped. Not because you're naive, but because the not knowing is the last soft place you get to stand. On the 4th day, I called my mother and told her the deal had unraveled. Escrow fraud. The buyer's financing collapsed. I was down to almost nothing, I said, my voice shaking for real, because some of the fear wasn't even acting. There was a pause on the line. Then my mother said, "Oh, Mara, well, these things happen." And then, before I'd even finished crying, she asked if I'd told your father yet, because he'd need to know before the quarterly meeting. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Do you need anything?" Before the quarterly meeting. That was the gut punch. 6 words that told me everything Elias needed to know, and everything I'd spent 34 years refusing to see. If this kind of story hits something in you, the family that keeps score instead of showing up, stay with me. Next part is where it gets worse before it gets better. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? 3 days after that phone call, my father invited me to dinner at the house. Not a restaurant. The house, where the dining room table still had the same water ring my brother left on it in 2004. There was a folder waiting at my seat. Not a menu, a folder. "We've been talking," my father said, before I'd even sat down, "and given everything you're going through, your mother and I think it's best if you sign the business over to family management for a while. Just until you're back on your feet." The folder held a power of attorney, full authority over my remaining assets, my company's residual equity. And I noticed, reading carefully, The way Elias had taught me to read anything with my name on it, full authority over any inheritance due to me from my grandfather's trust. My mother slid a pen across the table. Onyx black, my father's initials engraved on the barrel. The same pen he signed contracts with when he wanted people to feel the weight of the moment. It's just a formality, she said. Again, that word. You're not thinking clearly right now, sweetheart. Let us carry this for you. My hand actually reached for the pen. Some old, tired part of me wanted so badly to be taken care of that it almost didn't matter what the paper said. Then I asked one question. Why does this include Grandpa's trust? My father's face didn't change, but his voice dropped half a register. Because it's all connected, Mara. It's family money. I put the pen down. It's not fake, I said. I mean it is. The loss is fake. I made it up. The silence in that room had a texture to it. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My mother's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. I'm not broke, I said, quiet and steady, the way Elias had coached me to say it if this moment ever came. I have every cent I sold my company for. I made up the story because my lawyer wanted to see what you'd do if you thought I had nothing left to offer you. And you brought me a power of attorney over a trust I didn't even know I had rights to. Before you asked if I was okay. Before either of you asked if I was okay. That was the reveal. Not a dramatic unveiling, just a quiet sentence in a dining room, landing like a dropped glass. My father recovered faster than I expected. That should have told me something too. You tested us? He said, standing, his voice climbing. You lied to your own mother, and you're upset with us? This is exactly the kind of manipulative thing that therapist of hers has been feeding her, my mother said to my father, like I wasn't in the room. She's always been dramatic, always looking for a reason to make this family the villain. By the following week, I'd heard from 2 cousins that I was going through something, that I'd always struggled with jealousy toward Colin, that maybe the sale of my company had gone to my head. My father didn't deny the trust discrepancy. He simply never mentioned it again, and hoped, I think, that I wouldn't either. I would have let it go right there, honestly. I was tired. But Elias called me on a Tuesday with a voice I'd never heard him use before. Careful, like he was handling something breakable. Mara, he said, I need you to sit down. A former bookkeeper at my father's firm, a woman named Priya, who'd quit 8 years earlier under circumstances nobody ever fully explained, had reached out to Elias after hearing, through a cousin, that someone was finally asking questions. She had boxes, actual boxes, in a storage unit in her sister's garage, of documents she'd photocopied before she left, because even back then, something hadn't sat right with her. What they showed was worse than a diverted trust. 11 years ago, around the time my grandfather's health started failing, my father had used Arthur Whitfield's medical decline to quietly redirect not just future distributions, but the underlying trust assets themselves, using a signature that Priya swore, and later a forensic document examiner confirmed, was not my grandfather's. It was close, practiced, but not his. There was a line in my grandfather's original handwritten notes, tucked in one of Priya's folders, that Elias read to me over the phone, and I've never forgotten the shape of it. Even paraphrased the way I'll tell it to you now, he'd written that he wanted his grandchildren to inherit something no one could argue them out of. Not money that came with conditions, but money that came with proof he'd seen them clearly. My father had spent over a decade making sure nobody ever saw that proof at all. Next part is where the truth finally has nowhere left to hide, and where this story gives you something better than revenge. Hit subscribe now so it's waiting in your feed, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had to test the people who were supposed to love you first? The Whitfield Realty Group holds an annual investor dinner every spring, in a ballroom with the kind of chandeliers that make everyone perform a slightly better version of themselves. My father had built his reputation there for 30 years. My grandfather built it for 40 before him. Elias and I sat at a table near the back, unremarkable, until the moment my father stood to give his usual remarks about family, legacy, and stewardship. Elias stood too. He didn't shout. That was the thing about Elias. He never needed to. He simply walked to the small podium Mick used for toasts, introduced himself as legal counsel representing a beneficiary of the Arthur Whitfield Family Trust, and began laying documents on the table, one at a time. Like a man dealing cards nobody wanted to see. The original 2015 trust filing, The 2016 amendment with a signature a state-certified forensic examiner had flagged as inconsistent. Priya's photocopies time-stamped, notarized as authentic copies of originals. Bank transfers from the trust's account into the firm's operating account over 11 years, totaling just under $4 million. Investors don't like surprises about where money actually goes. You could feel the room's temperature change, glass by glass, before anyone said a word. My father tried to laugh it off first. Ambitious accusations for a Tuesday night, and when that didn't land, he pivoted to me directly, in front of everyone. This is my daughter settling a grudge because she feels overlooked. Ask anyone in this family how she gets when she doesn't feel like the center of attention. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not asking you to believe me, I said. I'm asking you to look at the signature examiner's report. It's already been filed with the county. This isn't a grudge. It's a paper trail. That's when Colin, my brother, who I'd braced myself for the worst from, stood up. And for one long second, I thought he was going to defend our father, the way he always had. Instead, he said, quietly, to the room, I've seen the same documents. She's telling the truth. My father's face did something I'd never seen it do in 34 years. It looked, for the first time, afraid. 2 nights later, someone broke into Elias's office. Nothing was taken except a single hard drive containing scanned copies of the trust documents. Copies. Because Elias, being Elias, had already backed everything up in triplicate. One set with our estate attorney, one with the county records office, one with me. The building's security camera caught a man in a gray jacket at 2:47 a.m., and when the footage went to police, the jacket was traced to a receipt on my father's corporate card. That was the desperate act. The one that turns he might be wrong, and 2, he was terrified of being right. My grandfather, it turned out, had never fully trusted my father with the family's story, not after watching him for 60 years. 8 months before he died, Arthur Whitfield had recorded a video with his estate attorney, sealed, to be opened only if the original 2015 trust was ever formally contested. We opened it in that same attorney's office, 3 weeks after the gala. My father wasn't there. He'd resigned from the firm's board 2 days earlier, quietly, through a 2-line email. On the recording, my grandfather looked smaller than I remembered him, but his voice was steady. He talked about building the firm from a single rented office. He talked about wanting his grandchildren to inherit something real, not something managed on their behalf by someone who thought love was the same thing as control. And then he said my name, and Colin's name, and left instructions: full trust authority, split evenly, with a standing foundation funded, finally. The way he'd always intended to support first-generation entrepreneurs from families like ours. People who'd never been told they were enough. He'd seen me, all along. He'd seen me. I just hadn't been in the room to know it. I didn't burn the family down. I didn't need to. My father stepped back from the firm entirely, quietly, the way people do when the alternative is a courtroom with their name in the filing. My mother and I speak sometimes now, carefully, like 2 people relearning a language neither of us is fluent in anymore. It's not warm yet, but it's honest, which is more than I had before. Colin and I run the foundation together now. Every spring, we pick 3 or 4 small businesses, the kind our grandfather would have recognized, built by people who grew up like we did, hungry for someone to simply notice them. And we fund them without conditions, without a power of attorney, without a pen sliding across a table. I didn't get revenge. I got proof. Proof that someone, at some point, really did see me. And proof that I get to decide now who else gets to. That's worth more than $35 million ever was. If this story gave you something to sit with tonight, that's exactly what it's here for. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. It means more than you know. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe on Mama's Tales so the next one finds you.